great vision and courage that he has to teach this class here at Dominican, and credit to Dominican for understanding the importance of sustainability. When I think of sustainability, I don't think of it as a new concept. I think of it as a remembrance of the divine. That when you read the sacred text of all the major faiths, you will see that the central religious figures will always talk about stewardship. One to ourselves and to each other, but also to Mother Earth. And that I think it's just now that as human civilization is sort of maturing, that we're remembering these lessons that were taught to us from the very beginnings. And so, when corporate America and corporate planet sort of put together these sort of sustainability plans and corporate social responsibility departments, Tony and I often say that it's not something you put in the corner. It's something that will be at the foundation and central to everything that we will do. So it's something that we have to sort of, this is not advanced or new technology. It's something that we can go back to our own scriptures of whatever faith tradition we walk in, and we can see the lessons right there. And so I sort of was inspired even by the name of FOS. It comes from the Greek and it means light. And that what I hope FOS to become, it's much more than just biodiesel or just a corporation. That it really becomes this sort of movement of as we reconnect back to our sort of original self. And so it's with that energy that I hope to speak to you tonight. Just a little bit of my background. In the mid to late 90s, I worked at Argonne National Laboratory, which it's the first national laboratory from the Department of Energy. It's off of 55, off of Stevenson, where Darien is. Not sure if everyone here is from Chicagoland, but so it's a southwest suburb. Our probably most famous or infamous project is the Manhattan Project, the nuclear bomb. And I often say that everyone comes to a point of sort of redemption, or so the National Lab has also gotten big into alternative energy back in the 90s. Interesting project we did back then was on hybrid battery technology. Long story short, we took it to Detroit. A lot of the testing for this hybrid batteries was done at Argonne. Detroit back in the 90s looked at it and said, you know what, guys, thanks, but no thanks. Does anyone remember what gasoline cost in 95, 96, 97, 98?
98 cents. 90 cents.
Exactly. It was, depending on what part of the country you're in, anywhere from about 90 cents to, just a little bit over $1. So the financial analyst at the big three said, really cool stuff, but, we're going to pass. It costs a lot to sort of put the marketing plan together and sort of, put a whole car around it. Good luck, And I often say this, and I'm sure here in the business school, you're as I was reading a lot of financial statements. And if you run a company just by the numbers, you will always make the wrong decisions. Doing what is right will be what is good for business as well. Toyota said, we'll buy the technology. Now mind you, this is a national lab, so this is US taxpayer dollars that are being used for this R&D. So we have to justify our cost as well. Basically, Toyota bought this basically at cost. They eventually turned this into Toyota Prius, which the marketing campaign behind that really put them as sort of the, it became the flagship of the company, became a symbol of the green movement. A-list movie stars like DiCaprio and Michael Douglas started driving them to the Oscars. And so I think it was a huge opportunity lost. And it was probably my first experience saying, wow, how do we blow this one again? And as an American scientist, as you think about why the National Laboratory System was even created, and when you look at inventions that came from the National Laboratory System, like the internet, which thank goodness we got that right, and as a result we have Silicon Valley. It's something that I said, you know, maybe this is why American entrepreneurship is the way it is, because most entrepreneurs here, they come from a place of frustration in corporate America and say, maybe we can do this a better way. And that was probably my first experience in the big boy world, saying, okay, there has to be a better way to sort of do this. Now, I started FOSS maybe about a couple years ago with some of the R&D and putting together the business plan. And this is where President Obama really was very instrumental. Obviously, President Bush came from big oil, him and Cheney. And so that probably wasn't the right time to talk about alternative energy. And with President Obama came this whole sort of spirit of change, of that, is there a new way to look at old problems? And you look at world events today, and you realize this really is an opportune time for us to sort of rethink this. If you look at the oil that we import, that it's coming from places that are not stable anymore, and where this revolution in the Middle East is going, who knows? So not only is it not good for our environment to be burning, and we'll get into some numbers in just a minute here, but for our national security, this is something that really puts us in a very precarious position. A lot of our foreign policy will be based on this. And this is something that mainstream media often doesn't talk about, of sort of connecting these sorts of dots. And so one thing I hope we get out of tonight is just a little clarity, and ultimately, hopefully, a call for action. A couple other organizations, I guess one other thing is one of the sort of milestones for the company was last year won a Department of Energy grant for the next generation of biofuel production. And one of the things that the Department of Energy sort of gave me sort of comments was that we love your micro-production model, and I will talk about the methodology of how we are doing this. It's community-based and it's very localized, which is completely opposite of how 99% of biodiesel production in the United States is done. And speaking of stewardship, there are a couple of organizations based here in Chicago that I'd really love to give some attention to. The Council for Parliament of the World's Religions. It's an organization started in 1893 at the World's Fair here in Chicago. If you remember the Columbian Exposition and with all the beautiful buildings and whatnot, it was the first time in the West that religious leaders from like Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam were brought here to the West, in particular here in Chicago. And it was a great way to start off sort of having dialogue and building these sort of bridges. And Play for Peace is an organization that deals with children. And bringing, for example, in Jerusalem we had a project where we brought Arab children and Jewish children together in non-competitive activities. And you know, it's like when your children play together, the parents come and watch, they break bread, and you start sharing stories. And you now start seeing, instead of us versus them, you start to think of the collective we. And so these are sort of organizations that I've been sort of had the sort of honor to have served with. And so, and by the way, if there's ever any question, please feel free to stop me. So who is FOSS and how are we doing this? There's a diagram up here that is, I'm not sure if there's an accounting professor here, but it's called triple bottom line accounting. So when you normally think of a company, you think of just bottom line, of profit and loss, the P&L statement. With this form of capitalism, probably the best way to sort of describe it is inclusive capitalism. Of that, normally when you think of capitalism, you think of like Adam Smith and Thomas Hobbes, and you think of capitalism built on, hi, welcome.